All right, hello everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is A, and I'm a co-chair of the Ames Pride Fest 2020 Planning Committee, as well as secretary for the Ames Pride Board of Directors. Happy Ames Pride Fest, and welcome to our support systems panel. Instead of a street festival this year, Ames Pride Fest is taking place through virtual programming from June through December. The Support Systems panel provides an opportunity for supporters of trans people to learn and hear stories from their fellow community members. Hear personal stories of how family or other support networks of people with diverse gender identities support their loved ones. This casual panel will provide a great opportunity to connect with other supporters. Listed on your screen are some other upcoming events that are happening soon. Some need to know items before we begin tonight's event. Keep up to date on our latest events on social media and on our website. Live captioning is available via Otter and can be accessed in the upper left-hand corner of the Zoom window by the red live box. Just click on Live Notes and choose to view the stream. We will also put the link in the chat for anyone who doesn't have that showing on their screen. You can also add your pronouns to your name on the screen so we can know them as we interact. If you want to add your pronouns, click on the participants icon, click More behind your name, and then rename. Add your pronouns, click OK, and then you're done. We want to create as safe a space as possible for our panelists and audience, so we ask that you respect the privacy of these supporters. This session is moderated for the safety of our presenters. If the Zoom crew determines that someone is attempting to derail a conversation or otherwise creating an unsafe space for our panelists, they can be moderated out of the discussion. Please keep mics and cameras turned off to minimize interruptions. Questions for the panelists can be added to the Q&A by going to the bottom of your screen and clicking on the Q&A button. Chat is meant for interaction, so if you really enjoy what our presenters are talking about or you have things to add to encourage and support the panelists and moderator, please use that to tell us. Our panelists would love to have that interaction given the online presence that we have tonight. Lastly, I would like to educate you on some basic terminology. These definitions are taken directly from the Human Rights Campaign website and may not be complete. I will also include a link to a more extensive list in the comments. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any further questions. So the first definition that I'm going to read is cisgender, a term used to describe a person whose gender identity aligns with those typically associated with the sex assigned to them at birth. And then up next is gender expression, external appearance of one's gender identity, usually expressed through behavior, clothing, haircut, or voice, and which may or may not conform to socially defined behaviors and characteristics typically associated with being either masculine or feminine. And then we have gender identity, one's innermost concept of self as male, female, a blend of both, or neither. It's how individuals perceive themselves and what they call themselves. One's gender identity can be the same or different from their sex assigned at birth. And then we have non-binary, an adjective describing a person who does not identify exclusively as a man or a woman. Non-binary people may identify as being both a man and a woman, somewhere in between, or as falling completely outside these categories. While many also identify as transgender, not all non-binary people do. And then lastly, we have transgender. It's an umbrella term for people whose gender identity and/or expression is different from cultural expectations based on the sex they were assigned at birth. Being transgender does not imply any specific sexual orientation. Therefore, transgender people may identify as straight, gay, lesbian, bisexual, asexual, or other. Once again, we would like to thank you all for coming out tonight and being a part of this. And I would like to especially thank our panelists for being willing to do this with us, and our moderator, Amy, will take over.
All right. Am I unmuted? Everybody hear me? Okay, good. So my name's Amy Papillon, and I have a role in the community, and then also at Iowa State, I teach the human sexuality class there, and I also teach a sociology class, gender and sexualities. So I want to start tonight. So what I will do in my role as moderator is I will throw out some questions to each of our panelists, and then I will also just help look through. If you have questions, you can put those in the question and answer space, and we will have some interaction there. But I first want to start out by asking our panelists to introduce yourself and maybe just share what your role here is tonight.
My name is Rachel, and I am the parent of a transgender teenager.
My name is Carolyn, and I am the parent of a genderqueer 38-year-old.
And I'm Catherine, she, her, hers, and I am the mom of a 19-year-old trans son.
I'm here as April, and I am the mom of a preteen transgender girl.
My name is Jenny, and I am a mom.
All right, thanks for introducing yourself, everyone. And so I think we'll just jump in with our first question. And so we were wanting you to talk a little bit about, outside of your home, what organizations or institutions have provided support to you and your loved ones.
Well, I'm happy to start. I've been involved with PFLAG for a long time, and quite a while ago, I was the president of the Ames PFLAG for about 10 years, and that was a really good place to share with other parents and LGBTQ people. And then I became part of Iowa Safe Schools, which is located in Des Moines and works very hard trying to educate educators in the state, K through 12 educators, on issues of LGBTQ students. So I presented for a number of years in those kinds of workshops, and was very pleased that they've started having trans workshops to educate educators about trans folks. So both those organizations were really helpful to me.
Well, I'll jump in. So actually, the funny thing was when my son came out, and I know this was after Carolyn's time, I couldn't find PFLAG. It was kind of like hidden, like so that, you know, it was private for folks. And so then as a parent who had this kid telling me like, I'm transgender, and of course I didn't know what that meant or anything really. And I couldn't find PFLAG anywhere. So that was like too hidden. And so my biggest resource was really the Center for LGBT QIA plus student success on campus. And Brad and Claire were lifesavers, absolute lifesavers for our family. When I literally walked into Claire's office, never having met her, and said, my kid's telling me he's transgender. I don't know what that means or what I'm supposed to do about it. And from the get-go, both of them were just super supportive and helpful, and helped us navigate through that really difficult transition period and some other tough things. So they've really been a big support for me.
Well, I'll share. I did know what transgender was when my daughter came out. And for me, it was just kind of figuring out, okay, how's this going to work for her? And so like one of the first things I did was reach out to a friend who worked at Iowa State, who I knew worked with something that was maybe sort of like to do with trans kids. And then she actually knew Amy. And so we got together and had dinner, and just sort of, that was kind of like the first like talking it out and what's going to happen. And I think some of the best resources that we've had, that University of Iowa Hospitals and Clinics LGBT program they have, they're so amazing. The doctor is so friendly who works with my daughter. She's so affirming of her. My daughter loves to go to those appointments. So that was a really great resource. We also at the time had an LGBT doctor, but they have since moved to Canada. And there's a Facebook group for parenting transgender kids that was super helpful for me at first. They do a fairly good job of kind of monitoring what kind of conversations are going on, and you have to answer some questions to get in. And that was really helpful. And that was kind of across the entire North America, Canada, and the United States, people who were kind of dealing with the same things.
Yeah, I'd say like April, I had experience supporting trans kids in the school system. I work as a school counselor. And so I knew what it was, but still as a parent, it was a totally different experience for me. And I found some online parent groups on Facebook that were very helpful. I reached out to someone that I knew who was involved in Names Pride, and she actually connected me to Catherine. And Catherine was so helpful in answering all my questions and just letting me vent. And we met for lunch. And so finding people who've been there and can kind of hold your hand through some of that was very helpful. I'd say for my kid found school to be extremely supportive. At the middle school through their GSA Prism, and then at the high school Spectrum. My kid has found that to be, she's just extremely affirmed at school. And then she has two therapists, one that she's had for a while, and then one that specifically specializes in supporting LGBTQ youth. And then her doctor team, I have a therapist that I've had forever. So we've kind of arranged our own team of support. I haven't necessarily reached out to any like official organizations like PFLAG or anything like that.
All right. So it sounds like that just finding that either an individual that can kind of help you, point you in the right direction. Also, I think it's cool to see the college campus connection that a few of you talked about. And I've seen that too with some of the young adults that I've worked with, and how some of the teenagers will kind of be able to access some of those college resources even before they're there. So I think that shows the important work that's being done. So, and then the importance of the GSA, like you talked about too, there at school. So that's great to hear. Did anybody else want to add anything that you felt like we missed there? Any questions? All right, so I also then, so that was kind of talking about what organizations you've had outside of your home. So let's switch back and say, like, how have you helped create a safe space within your home? So what are some things you did specifically? And that could be within your immediate home. And some of you might want to talk too about extending that to extended family members even. So what are those in-home types of things that you've done?
Well, I think as a parent, there is no option but acceptance for my kid. Just not an option. Like, I have never had someone come back and, I mean, you usually give them the little moment that they need to kind of connect the dots. And I've had to help one or two people connect dots that they weren't able to connect. But as far as, you know, supporting my kid, you don't get to be in our world if you don't. Like, that's just not even, I don't even expect that from people. So I guess I just come into it with the expectation that we're all on board and, you know, love my kid, because why wouldn't you? And so within our house, we use a lot of humor. You know, we talk a lot about menstruation and, you know, things along those lines. And so we just use a lot of humor. And I think, you know, when he transitioned, you know, we certainly went through the name and pronoun thing that I think everybody goes through as far as just that transition. So, you know, we went from his given name to actually just calling him A, because the name was, both names started with the same letter. And then we got used to using his new name, in which he picked out and I didn't like, I'll be honest. And I felt a little upset that he picked this name. I'm like, that's my job as mom, is to pick the name. But we got over it, and now I use his name all the time. And anyway, then we just got used to pronouns and using his name. And You know, it was just like as soon as we messed up, we would acknowledge it, say it the right way, and move on. And with family, you got to be on board to be in the bubble. So some of our family members that I'd be most surprised have supported my son because that's what's expected. So they're awesome, and so is he.
I'd say for us, basically the same thing. Like as soon as she asks for something, we're ready to grant that. Whether it was a long time from the day that she said I'm a girl to the day that she said this is my name. It was several months, and I was kind of like just waiting for it to happen. Like when's the day gonna come where she asks us to call her something different? But it did, and we were ready for that. And I know that's different for other families. For some families, it all happens like at once, and it's a huge shift. But it was kind of different from what I expected it to be, in that there were lots of long periods of time where it was like, nothing's changing, nothing's going to happen. She made this big revelation, and that was hard for me. But as soon as she asked for something, we were ready to move forward with that. And then I would say too, like what Catherine said, like the only thing I hope she ever saw from us was support. If there were feelings that I needed to process, I made sure I processed those with my husband, with friends, with my support system, with my therapist, so that she didn't know that maybe there was something I was really worried about. And hopefully she wasn't picking up on any of the things that comes with just being a mom related to her identity.
I would say for my daughter, the clothing was a big deal. As soon as she put a dress on, there was literally no going back. She won't even wear khakis. I send her pictures of women wearing khakis, but she just doesn't believe me. So she'll only wear like leggings and skirts and shorts and dresses. And that, I think, really helped her to sort of, we did have a situation where she tried to tell my sister that her new name was going to be Fudgelina. Keep in mind, she was about like 7 years old at this time. And so my daughter called me like, are we supposed to really call her Fudgelina? And so no, luckily because she was so young, I had the ability to like give her a list of names and tell her she had to pick. So I kind of lucked out, I guess, there with having a young child that was still willing to let her mom participate in some of that. I think her dad had a harder time, and it wasn't because he didn't want to support her. That was his boy, and like imagine things that would happen. And so it was hard for him to sort of let go of that at first, but he certainly never let on to her that he was feeling any of those things. And I think it's really important as parents to recognize that you're going to have feelings, and they might not always be the best feelings in the world, and that's okay, as long as you're supporting your kid and dealing with your feelings in an appropriate way. And within a year, he turned to me and said, I can't even ever believe that she was a boy. Like, it seems like she's always been a girl. So that was really great. I think the other piece that sort of is a bridge from home is school was really important. You're spending, how long do they spend there every day? A lot of time. And so when she transitioned, we reached out to the principal of the school and had a sit down conversation. And I went in there like geared up, ready to go, mama bear it up, just in case anyone was upset. And then she brought the school counselor, and the school counselor was like above the moon, like so excited that she was going to have a trans kid. And like she'd been planning for this her whole life. And so it was really, really awesome. And so that was a really good experience for us.
So my child came out as a lesbian in 8th grade. Or I guess she came out as bi, and then she identified as lesbian for a long time. And I guess partly she was a real activist. So she, oh gosh, the pronouns are so hard. At that point, she was identifying as she. So I'll use that for a few minutes. But so we went to the school board together, and we tried to get the Gay Straight Alliance going at the high school. And my child actually was the founder of Spectrum at Ames High. And so my husband and I were very supportive of that. We tried to kind of walk next to her in her journey. So I joined PFLAG and eventually led PFLAG. And I must say that the hardest thing for me has just been the darn pronouns. Now she would prefer that I use they. And I had 35 years of referring to my child as she. And I asked her today for preparation for this panel, what we had done well, what we had done that we could improve on to the pronouns. And so I'm working on that. She wants to go by they, and I respect that. That's her absolute right. And I still have to practice. That's all I can say. But we've tried to be supportive in every way that we can. And it's just been a journey for all of us.
Carolyn, I love that you added that, that kind of checking in and asking your child, like, hey, what did we do well? What could we improve on? Because I think that, and one thing I noticed too is like thinking about, similarities and differences and commonalities for just parenting in general, that when one of you said, it's not always what you expect. And, and I can even think I have cisgender children, and there's been times when like they're choosing their major or something, and I'm having to let go of maybe an expectation of what I thought they might be doing. So I think that's interesting to think about. What are those commonalities, and then also what are the differences? So I heard from Rachel saying too, like letting the person be in charge, and actually a little bit from each of you, letting the person be in charge of their story and it not always following the way that you expected it. So, and then not making assumptions too. Like I heard from Catherine, you saying that, maybe some of your family members, you had some preconceived ideas of who was going to be supportive and who was not. And so maybe letting go of those assumptions sounds like it worked out well for you to realize that sometimes you were pleasantly surprised, it sounds like, by people. And then lastly, the kind of just summarizing from there, like where to process the feelings. So Rachel, you talked a little bit about that, and I think that's an important message for people to hear, that it's okay to have feelings, and just thinking about where you can express them and what are your support outlets. And so, and I don't know, Jenny, if you want to jump in maybe and share a little bit about some of that processing of feelings, or processing that happened for you, if you'd feel comfortable doing that.
Well, we had a kind of a different journey, but like I said earlier, we're getting through it. There's nothing I wouldn't do for my child, and would never turn away from them. Sorry, I'm a little emotional. Can we
Yeah,
this part?
yeah. Thanks for sharing that though. And I think, we appreciate your vulnerability. Because I also think that it shows, even when we're all supportive of our family members, we still have a lot to learn. And so yeah, I think that's really an important takeaway. So, so this kind of goes, a few of you have talked already about this, but maybe if we go and speak a little bit more specifically about how, if it's applicable, how you've helped your loved one talk about the subject of gender identity with family and friends. So thinking more specifically to what that might have looked like, whether that again was with helping them make that introduction to extended family or within their friend groups. What's that been like for your kids and adults?
I can go ahead and go first. So my daughter was 14 when she told us. She had already come out to several friends by that time, and she was at the age where like I was not in charge of her friends. I hardly know who she's kind of hanging out with at that point. But for like our family friends and our family, we have she was 4 at the time, so we have a 4-year-old too. And she came out to my husband and I, and then her 12-year-old sister, and so she asked us to start using her new name. And we were doing that, but she said, I'm not ready for Kate, the 4-year-old, to know yet, because I'm not ready for everybody to know. And she knew it was going to be hard to like tell a 4-year-old to use 2 different names. So there was a time where we were using her name now, just in certain situations when we were more private, and when we were in other settings, we were using the name that we gave her when she was born. And it just got to a point where she told us, I'm ready for everybody to know me as Alice. And that meant we started with her siblings. She wanted to tell the grandparents on Christmas Day in her own way, and we processed that with her. And we asked her if it was okay if we prepped them, and she said yes. So we prepped the grandparents and the aunts and uncles and cousins who were going to be there, and just said, hey, we have an announcement we're going to make as a family on Christmas. Just so you know, our child's been exploring their identity. We expect that if you have questions, you can ask us, the parents, but please, we know everyone will, basically let them know that it's our expectation that everyone's going to be supportive of this. And we didn't have any major concerns that wasn't going to happen, but we did feel like we didn't want this huge announcement on Christmas to not go how our daughter was expecting it to go. And we made sure she was okay with that. So they got a little bit of a heads up from us that there's going to be an announcement, so no one was like totally in shock when it happened. And with like family friends, if they were going to be, my close friends, it got to a point where Alice was okay with us telling everybody that she's going by Alice now. And I kind of chose to do that based on my comfort level with them, and then how much exposure they were going to have to, like, if they're coming into our home, I made sure they knew beforehand that our child is now going by this name and using these pronouns, so that she's not put in the position where she's being misgendered and in her own home inadvertently. So that's kind of how we decided how to share that with them. And I don't have any stories where we've really had any pushback or had to like have more conversations with any friends or family, other than this is what's happening in our family. And by presenting it in this is Alice and she's very loved, I think that shut down any opportunity for if anyone did have anything negative to say about it. We're open to answering questions, but not open to like debating whether or not this is okay. So that's how we've handled it.
That was super cool, Rachel. In our family, the family part was easy because we have someone who's transgender already in our family. And so it was very easy transition for myself and my siblings and my parents. I think the biggest concern that I had was what was going to happen at school, because she had attended kindergarten as a boy and she was going back to first grade as a girl. And it was shockingly awesome. I mean, I asked the principal, please put her with a teacher who is experienced and who is, going to be supportive of her. And she did. And the teacher was amazing. And they're still like best friends. And the funny things that happened, like the teacher would tell me when I would pick her up from school, like that the kids were all standing in line and they said to her, so do you still have the same memories from, and then her old name last year, or are you like a different person? And she was like, no, I still have the same memories. I'm the same person. I'm just a girl now. And they were like, oh, okay. And so like these, just funny how these young little kids just instantly get it and don't bat an eyelash. And so, it went like 1,000 million times better than I was expecting. And it's been a wonderful journey. And I'm so nervous about middle school because I think that's the scariest thing ever. And I'm actually not named April, but I'm here today because my daughter has decided that she doesn't want people to remember that she used to be a boy. And I think that's going to be challenging. I don't know how that's going to go, since we were very, very open about it for the first, several years. In fact, she and I lectured at Iowa State in like 4 or 5 different classes about her story. And so we'll see how that goes. And that's just that we're kind of at the tip of the iceberg of that particular piece of our journey. And so we'll deal with it as it comes.
I think for us, it was truly a lifesaver that we came to Ames. Where we were, it wouldn't have been a good environment. I don't think that my son would have understood what was happening and what the options were had we stayed where we were. And so we moved here when he was in 8th grade, and he was still presenting as a girl, completely no indicators. You know, sometimes people are like, you know, oh, I thought maybe. I never thought maybe, you know, and then got pretty depressed 8th grade year, and we couldn't quite figure that out. Big change in grades, mood swings, all of those things. And that lasted into the freshman year. And then he started going to Spectrum. And I will always be so thankful to Carolyn and her child for creating that space that made my kids' journey safe and possible. Because that's where, you know, at first I'm like, oh, how cool, I've got this kid who's an ally, like that's really sweet, like what a great kid I have, you know. And then he would come home and he'd be like, you know, today we learned about, you know, X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. And, you know, like he would open up these conversations with me about different things he was learning in Spectrum. I'm like, well, that's interesting, you know. Like, so I was kind of starting to pick things up. And but I think it gave him the language, it gave him the understanding, it gave him the support that he needed even before he came out. And he actually decided to come out in a very public way that we as his parents, his therapist, all disagreed and said it was a horrible idea. And he did it anyway because he's a teenager. And I have to remind myself and other parents sometimes, they're still teenagers and they can still be jerks. You know, just because they're transgender doesn't make them like not jerks that teenagers can sometimes be. And so he was in a play, actually. He was involved in theater, and decided that he was going to put in his notes in the playbill, change his name and pronouns. And we're like, that's a terrible idea. Like, that's like opening, like that's the Pandora's box. Like, you can't close that again. And he's like, yeah, okay. And then he did it anyway. So we go to see the show with, you know, a few hundred other people and open the program. We're like, okay, well, I guess, you know, he's out now, so we're doing this. And so, you know, they're still well, in our case, a teenager, and teenagers just kind of do their own thing. So the only other thing I would say is we have learned way more from him than he has learned from us. He actually created a Google Doc of information that he asked us to read when he came out, so we would be informed on all the topics that we needed to be.
I will say that too. My kid came out in a very Alice-like way. She like, said, I have an announcement to make at Christmas to the extended family, like told this really dumb joke, and then was like, by the way, I identify as female, please call me Alice. And we were like, my husband and I were like, oh God, that's how she, but it was so like, it's her, that's how she's done everything. That's just her personality. And we're like, okay, yep, that makes sense. That's how she would do that. Yeah.
All right. I love how you said that you're open to questions, but not open to debate identity. And that kind of fits too, Catherine, what you said about, you know, that there wasn't another option not to be supportive, like really having that boundary. And so seeing that importance of the support people and family as setting those boundaries. And I love talking, April sharing about, you know, the stories with the little ones. Like, children are so open, which I think we can learn so much from. And I think that importance of early education and awareness that hopefully I think our kids are getting younger now, and that is putting them in a position to educate us, right? So I think that's cool. So, and just also thanks for sharing about the diversity of experiences that your kids have had, that, and how that isn't like set in stone either, that they may change their level of openness, they may change the way they want to identify. As Carolyn mentioned, they may change the pronouns that they want to use, and all of that is part of that fluidity and perfectly fine. So let's talk a little bit about, for those of you that this is applicable for, how your loved one navigated puberty as a gender diverse child. And that could be even thinking about, you know, April, I know you talked about having a middle schooler, so thinking about even going into that, you know, what are the things that you're thinking about going into that? So talk a little bit about that puberty transition and what that's like.
Okay, I can talk a little bit about kind of the preteen thing that we have going on right now. We've been going to the LGBT doctor in Iowa City since she came out. Pretty much we made our appointment and we went first every year, and then as she's gotten closer to the age of puberty, we go every 6 months. She's recently started having some symptoms, like her armpits kind of smell weird, and just that. So we called and had a conversation with the doctor a couple weeks ago, and so this week I'm going to take her in to get tested, and they're going to test her blood and see what her hormone levels are, and if she is into the place where she's having the male hormones come through, we will start her on monthly hormone blocker shots until the time when it's time for her to be able to take the female hormones. And you know, she's known about this since the very beginning of time, since we started going to this doctor, because they told us everything in that first appointment. And you know, her first response was, oh man, I have to get a flu shot every month, that's going to be terrible. But she also recognizes that it's going to be really good for her. You know, we've had a lot of good experiences meeting up with other trans people in the area, and I think it's been really wonderful for her to meet these folks who, you know, didn't have the support that she has growing up, and you know, definitely wish that they could have done something like hormone blocker shots to stop some of the things that happen when you have male puberty that goes through. So we are on the very precipice of this adventure. More to come next year.
I'll say we're kind of in the middle of it right now. So Alice didn't come out to us till she was 14, and I read everything I could get my hands on the internet. I read books, so I felt like I absorbed all this info, and I said to her at one point, like, you know, some people want to talk to a doctor about this. There are hormones you can take to affect your puberty and your development. And she said, no, not right now. And I was like, okay. But in the back of my mind, I was like, but the sooner you start it, maybe the more happy you'll be with the results. Like all these things that I had read and things that I was seeing other parents on the Facebook support group, all the things their kids were going through and they were in the middle of. We were not there yet, and my kid was not there yet. So I am glad I brought it up with her, because then the day she said, I think I'm ready to talk to a doctor about this, I knew who to call. I had the doctor from Iowa City's card. I stopped her at last year's Pride Fest and said, can I please get your card so I can call you when we're ready? So the day that she said, she knew she could come to me and say, I think I'm ready to talk to the doctor. It took months, and that was hard for me to let her drive that train. But then I think we must probably see the same doctor at the University of Iowa, who's been so helpful. I email her, she emails, she's answered every question that I have, even if I have to ask him more than once. So we're in the middle of figuring all that out. But surrounding yourself with a really good care team, I think is really important as you get to puberty, because that really developmentally and for managing dysphoria is really important to have good providers and a good support system.
And we got the distinct honor of going through puberty twice. So that was awesome. So we had the female puberty and then the male puberty, and the male one was better, stinkier, but better. And I will say, just from my experience, girls smell worse than boys at that age. So anyway, yeah, so he did Lupron as a puberty blocker, and then started testosterone. It was amazing that the university insurance at that time covered Lupron. It's actually a drug for chemotherapy, and it's incredibly expensive, thousands of dollars each month, and we had to sign for it every time we'd get it and the whole bit. And actually, about the time he was just about to turn 18, the university insurance stopped covering that and went to a generic. So we, at that time, talked to the doctor and decided just to stop doing the puberty blocker, since he was about that age anyway. So I can't speak to, what the drug that is available to kids now through the university health plans is, how well it works. But yeah, he, I think one big thing is he's handled his own medical care. Like, you know, I just told him, like, you're going to have to do this. I'm busy. I can't be running you around everywhere. So really from the time he was 16, he scheduled all his own doctor's appointments. His doctor's office here in Ames would actually give him his injections. Every 2 weeks was the testosterone, and then once a month for the Lupron. And so they handled it. And then when he went off to college, they like trained him in how to do his own shots and gave him all the materials and everything. It was just awesome. And Dr. Katie Larson-Odie over in University of Iowa is just phenomenal. Like, I wish she could be my doctor. She's just like a phenomenal physician and so supportive. And he's had top surgery. And, you know, the only other thing related to puberty is one thing that he did was he took vocal lessons because he's a singer and an actor. And so he had to kind of move from kind of faking his deeper voice to his real voice. And when he got up to sing, when he was graduating at the baccalaureate, he got up and he had this grown man voice, and I didn't actually know where it came from. Like, how did my kid get this grown man voice? But that was kind of a fun transition point.
I really like how you talked about being able, like Rachel, to be able to have, you were just there. And I often call that, when I teach, I always say the importance of being an askable adult. And so it sounds like you all really modeled that so great for your children. And then I think too, that point of then being patient, like you've now made yourself an askable adult, and then kind of being able to step back and put your child in the driver's seat. So that's really cool to hear. And then I'm hearing too, another theme I'm hearing is this importance of having affirming care teams. So doctors, healthcare providers, school. April, you talked about how affirming the school was to work with. So I would ask, like, has anyone not had a supportive like doctor or person on the team, and how did you navigate that if you did have that type of experience? What were maybe some tips on navigating that?
So my child is quite a bit older than anybody else's here. So we went through coming out at a much younger age. I mean, not a much younger age, a much earlier era in time. And my child, I think, rarely had a supportive physician. So when Gina went to physicians, they appeared to have very little understanding of what the healthcare needs of a young lesbian person would be. And I think that that Gina is still sensitive to physicians and their sometimes lack of understanding or affirmation. So my child went through this in an earlier era, and it was tougher, but I'm thrilled to hear the great experiences that that the others have had. That's wonderful. Times maybe really have changed.
I will say we did switch pediatricians. So we are still going to someone at the same clinic, but I think it was my child's therapist who I said, you know, we're gonna need to have a pediatrician's office that is okay with giving these shots. And I was just getting a sense from my child's doctor that I did not feel comfortable talking to my child's doctor about this. So I asked around about if anyone had a doctor locally that would be comfortable helping us arrange for the shots, even though because they were prescribed by the doctor in Iowa City. And so they were helpful. I called I don't know, it's called a patient specialist that runs the whole, I'm not going to use the name of the clinic, just I don't know if that's okay to say that or not, but it's the big one in Ames. They have a patient specialist department. So I called that department and said, I need a provider who's going to be specifically okay answering our questions about having a transgender kid and helping us with the treatment. And I was a little disappointed in their answer that they didn't have anyone who's specifically trained, and there was one who moved. So I had to ask around, but I have never had a provider misgender my kid or indicate any discomfort with anything. Everyone, when I've called to make appointments, you know, we've changed names in the last couple of years. So when I call for the eye appointment, when I call for the dentist, when I call for going to see a couple different specialists, I have to say, oh, we're using this name now. And nobody has batted an eye about that. So I'm glad, I'm glad too that it seems to be becoming more widely accepted and just what they do, hopefully good practice.
So my experience with the Ames group in McFarland, we were originally with a small private doctor who was LGBTQ. They were part of PFLAG, like everything was wonderful. And then they moved to Canada. And so we had to come back to McFarland. And I called the front desk and said, the pediatrics, and I said, hey, guess what? I need a new pediatrician and I need them to be someone who's going to be transgender friendly with my daughter and supportive. And the person was like, well, I'm sure everybody would be. And I said, okay, cool. Well, I'll be checking in with them. And so we did get someone, and she was fantastic. And then she moved. And so at that point I said, you know, Dr. Larson Odie had mentioned a name of someone who she had at least done a training with, who was a pediatrician. And so I called and said, hey, I know this person's not taking patients, but she's done this training with her doctor in Iowa City. And can you ask her if she'd be willing to take on my child because her other doctor has moved? And so she asked her and she said yes. And so now she actually has all three of my kids under the same one. And so we feel really, really lucky about that. She's extremely supportive. And yeah, I think, you know, my child's legal name is still their old name because we wanted to make sure that puberty happened before we actually took that legal step to change it, just in case she decided to go back, and then she would have this whole name change thing that she had to fill out on every form for the rest of her life. And so that is a thing where I have to make sure to go up and McFarland has her nickname in there. And so they usually do call out the correct name. And, you know, her and I talk about it before we go, of like recognizing that you never know when someone might read the legal name, because she's aware that she still has that legal name. So we just kind of think about it ahead of time and prepare ourselves. And usually the best happens and not the worst.
It sounds like you all also, a theme I'm hearing is this importance of advocating and being able to make those phone calls, search out who's gonna be the best support. And so, you know, not just being supportive of your child, but also advocating for them too. So, all right, we're gonna have some time where we can have everyone, if they have questions, but I do have one more question that I would like you all to address is, what do you wish you'd known before your loved one came out that you would have allowed you to better support them? So I think we had Jenny volunteer to start us off with this one. So Jenny, we'll let you take that one over.
Okay, so I wish I would have paid more attention to, I guess, what you would call signs that they were feeling different, you know. I didn't see it. And I really wish that I would have known at the time that all of this was okay, that it was accepted, and that it was normal for them. I didn't know anything about the different identities that people could have. I really just didn't know any of that. So I wish I would have understood that before they had to go through that pretty much alone, because I kind of failed there. You know, I didn't realize what they were going through. So that's the biggest thing. I have a lot of guilt about that, but like I said, we're good. So yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. Who else wants to jump in there? Anybody else, what you wish you would have known before?
I wish I would have known all the support that we would feel once she came out. I was terrified of every step in the process. I felt terrified that I wasn't going to know how to help her, or that it was going to be harder than I thought. terrified of all the changes. And I wish I would have known, just even looking back 1 year, how beautiful it's been and how much support we found, and how, like, I was talking to my mom I was terrified I had no idea how some of our family was going to react. And I've been pleasantly surprised every step of the way. Once we've shared more about our kid and how this has been, we're finding other people coming out and saying, oh, this is happening to my family, and I know this happened to this other person that I know. And it's been much more supportive than I ever imagined it could have been. I was picturing this was going to be some kind of a battle, and like we were just going to be us against the world, and it was not. It has not been like that at all. So I wish I could go back in time and tell myself to calm down and trust that my kid knows what she's doing, and that we've raised a good kid, and that we have a support system that I don't know, I was afraid was going to fail us, and that hasn't happened. And I was telling my mom recently that, like, I was afraid I was going to have a teenager that I couldn't drag out of the basement to graduate high school because he was downstairs on the computer all the time. And now I have a 16-year-old who is auditioning for the school musical, and cannot wait till I let her get a job, and is advocating for herself. And so to see that, I wish I could go back in time and show this, like, how beautiful it's been and how positive it's been to, like, the Rachel that was a year and a half ago who was just terrified and not sure what to do.
Thanks. What about Catherine, Carolyn, April? Anything kind of parting thoughts you want to share?
Well, I guess I wish that I had understood the importance of pronouns, because, I think I just didn't take it seriously enough. I didn't try hard enough, and, called my daughter, said something like, oh, it's the birthday girl 2 years ago. And, that went over like a lead balloon. And then I cried when she criticized me. And I just wish that I had taken it more seriously right from the start and just worked harder. So sure, it takes practice to use preferred pronouns when they don't just come naturally, but I promised her I'm going to try. I promised, see what I did. I promised them I'm going to try very hard. So I wish I had really understood the importance of that particular issue.
I think one of the big things is parenting is hard. Like, it's a hard thing to do in life. And, you are trying to raise just good people who are good and are kind and contribute in good ways, right? And this is just like their identity, this piece of their identity is just like one part of them. And it's tough. And, you deal with all these weird things when they're teenagers anyway, and then young adults. Maybe it's a partner that you don't really care for, or a job you don't think they should have taken, or a move that you don't think they should make. These are life things that just happen to people. And I think as parents, we just have to do our best, and I kind of just feel like I kind of learned as I went, but I have to give myself grace. And I think that's a hard thing to do as a parent, because we beat ourselves up all the time because of the things we screw up. But you got to give yourself grace. And now I'm so thankful, because now I do get connected with other parents who are just starting to go through this. And I think the hardest piece for me was, does my kid have a future? Does my kid have a future? Is my kid gonna grow up and be accepted? Are they going to be able to have a traditional job? Are they going to find a partner? Are they going to have kids? And some of these things are still in the future to know. And you don't know that about any of your kids, regardless of what gender identities they hold. And so I think that's the thing, is just, and that's why I think these panels are really important, because when you're first starting out, you just don't know. Like, even if it wasn't a gendered future, it was still a specific future that you had for your kid. And I think knowing that they can go to college, or they can be an artist, or they can move to, across the country and take the wild new job that's exciting. I mean, they still have those moments to look forward to, and you're not losing that. You're just kind of changing the way your kid is presenting. And frankly, you're probably going to just have a much happier person to live with. once your kid really is able to live as their true self.
I think that when Rachel, you said stuff that exactly is from my heart. You know, I was so full of fear and I was ready to fight when I kind of went to that school and had that meeting with that principal. And I thought I was going to be fighting hordes of parents with pitchforks. And, you know, I haven't fought with any parents. I haven't had anyone say anything that wasn't supportive. And, you know, so I think what you said about like going back and telling yourself, and I think I would go back and tell myself, like, you're going to fight, but it's going to be a different way. You know, like I fight by participating on the interview panel for the principal of the school that my child goes to make sure that her voice is heard there and other kids like her have a voice in that space. And, you know, that's a really helpful way that I can participate in making sure that there is a safe space in Ames for all of our kids.
I like this theme I'm hearing of kind of changing the narrative. It makes me think I had a student who's trans this past year who some of the other students were kind of asking, like, they were expecting this kind of trauma story and to hear all these bad things that had happened. And so I think that it's so important to change that narrative and to get to hear stories of acceptance and support and learning, to show that we don't put that expectation of a trauma experience always onto people. So I like that, how you all are talking about that. And Jenny, that parent guilt, that's the worst. So I that resonates when I hear you talking about that. So knowing that support is there, you all talked about. And also I liked somebody who said that, you know, just this is a piece of a person's identity. And there's so much more to who we all are. And so I do want to say, again, if there's anybody that has any questions, otherwise, so we can see if anybody, I'm kind of trying to monitor the chat here to see if we had any questions that we didn't answer, but otherwise, do you have anything that you wanted to say before we conclude?
So I just wanted to take another moment and thank you all so much for agreeing to do this and for utilizing your resources and taking your time out of, you know, hectic, busy weeks to come and do this. I know that as a trans person, I know that talking about trans experiences can be very difficult to do. And so I just appreciate all of the work that all of you are putting in as parents, as supporters, as panelists. So again, thank you so much. And thank you to all of our attendees as well. So, yeah.
Thanks.
All right, at this time, everybody have a good night.
Thanks. Talk to you later.
Thanks, everybody.